So good morning, Anne.
Morning.
How are you? You good?
Absolutely fine, thanks. Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I am very delighted this morning to be chatting to Anne Desmet RA, and I'm going to very quickly just do a screen share of her website because her work is absolutely outstanding, and it's just lovely to have this opportunity to ask some questions. So there we are. That's your amazing site, and this is one of your collage pieces.
It's a collage of wood engravings and linocuts and monotypes. Yes, behind convex glass, that particular piece. So
That's just incredible. I was really taken with your work. We'll stop sharing that now. I was really taken with your work when I was asked to go and review it by Aspect County at Pellant House, and I went with a couple of artists as well, and we were just absolutely enchanted by the new work that you've created. But what would be really helpful, if you don't mind,
Yep.
is if you just take us back to the beginning. Did you always knew you were going to be an artist? Was this something you were born and, 5 years old said, I'm going to do art?
No, absolutely not. And my father was an oyster farmer turned hotelier, and my mum was a paediatric surgeon. I was brought up in Liverpool, but I was born with quite a significant disability of my hip. I had a dislocated hip that failed to respond to an awful lot of surgery. So I spent 5 or 6 years of my childhood in hospital. 3 months here, 6 months there, a year there. And back in those days, if you were in hospital for any sort of orthopedic surgery, you were then just lying in bed for months before you'd be allowed to get up and learn to walk again. So you'd be in hospital, not exactly ill, but kind of stuck and bored. And I spent an awful lot of the time drawing. I was interested in drawing, but I was not good at it. I can't say I was someone born with a precocious talent or had any artist family or anything like that. I didn't. I just was drawing to pass the time and drawing and reading.
So did someone suggest to you should draw, or did it just come instinctively?
I can't remember. I wish I could remember. I can't. My dad used to do little doodles, little cartoons and things for me. So that might be where I got it from. But he died when I was 9, so I can't ask him really. So, but I started off drawing cartoons, certainly, of other children in the hospital beds around me. And to say they weren't terribly good, they were quite well observed. I get in a lot of details, but I can't say they were well drawn. And then I moved on to drawing more things like still lives, the bowls of grapes by my bed, or my face reflected in the light bulb of the Anglepoise lamp above my bed, or my face reflected in a teacup, my own hands and feet, bowl of cherries, all that. And
so you did your 10,000 hours really instinctively, without really realizing it, of the practicing.
I did, yes, yes. And I had a good art teacher at school. I was at a comprehensive school in Liverpool that had good art teachers and very minimal equipment. So I was learning to draw with pencils and biros and things, but nothing more elaborate than that. But yes, the 10,000 hours that you say were all spent in hospital drawing, and did reach a point where I sort of realized I was becoming quite good at it, and was really loving it. So it all developed from there, really. But my mum was very supportive, and my dad while he was alive.
Yeah. So you came out of hospital and presumably then went back into school to do your conventional education as a teenager. Did you pursue it once you came back out?
I did. I mean, I did art O level and art A level, and at the time, though, I was keen to go to art school, but I had no idea of how you went about anything like that, or how anyone would go about having a career as an artist. And in Liverpool at the time, this was, I was doing my A levels in 1982, and the Tate Liverpool didn't exist then. Liverpool was still quite, it's my hometown, so I love it. But it was still, you could really still see the after effects of World War II. It was desperate for regeneration and redevelopment, and you couldn't get jobs, part-time jobs of hardly any sort, not really even full-time jobs to a large extent in Liverpool then, and absolutely not in the arts. There was a strong music culture, obviously, because of the Beatles, but there was no visual arts culture really. There were a few wonderful galleries, the Walker Art Gallery and the Blue Coat Arts and Lady Lever Gallery and Port Sunlight, where you could see historic artworks, but nothing for a contemporary artist. So I really didn't have any idea how you do that. And I was quite academic at school. So school and my mum were keen that I apply to Oxford. And so I was saying, but I want to go to art school. And they were saying, well, there's an art school in as part of Oxford University. If you,
yeah.
you go to art school, if you can get into that. And I did. But I sort of feel I did make up, well, as a lot of artists do, I kind of made up my career as I went along, really, because there was precious little advice.
Yeah, I know very much of the same era and wanted to go to art school, and it didn't happen until I was, well into my 30s. Because, I didn't know it was an option. I didn't know that was an option for a career. Yeah, times are different now, but nevertheless, I still think, especially at the moment with the world as it is at the moment, probably some of the similar feelings are happening, and parents want children to get jobs where they feel that might be a bit more secure financially, etc.
I certainly, I can remember thinking, in the early years of my career, for probably 10 or more years, thinking that I would be having to have another sort of job, maybe secretarial or in an art gallery if I could manage it, or something to support my art, and that the art would be what I wanted to do, but would have to be a sideline, because I couldn't envisage how you'd go about making a living out of it. But things gradually changed. But it is really only in the last 10 years or so that I would say I've been fully self-supporting as an artist and haven't had other other strings to my bow. I was for 10 years, I worked in an art gallery in London 2 days a week, and then for another 15 years I was editor of Printmaking Today magazine, and that was a big job, but crammed into 1 day a week. And
wow.
And a lot of weekends, but it was a big job. Yes.
Was that prior to the working in the gallery?
No, it was. I mean, I started off. I finished my degree at Ruskin School in Oxford. I then
and that was in what? What was your degree in?
In fine art.
In fine art.
Yeah. Yes. Which was, it's an Oxford University degree with an art history and a practical art component.
Wow.
And then I did a postgrad year at Central School of Art, and then I got a job at the Bankside Gallery in London, the home of the Royal Society of Painter Printmakers and the Royal Watercolour Society. So I was there for 9 years, and I started off being, general dog's body, moving pictures around, working at the reception desk, doing the most menial jobs there, and gradually I was given control of editing some of their newsletters, and then they started to produce a printed magazine, little magazine for their friends, and I became the editor of that, and then I got offered the job of editing Printmaking Today. So that came after that. I left the Bankside because I was expecting my first child, and was imagining I would go back there after he was born, but in fact the job offer for Printmaking Today came up, and I went to that instead, but for 15 years. So I was there till 2013, and only stopped that because by then I'd been elected a Royal Academician, and was finding I was better able to make a living. So
so how do you think that came about then, the election to the Royal I can never say it. Royal Academician. Yes. Election to the Royal Academy, so much easier.
I was stunned to be elected, to be honest, because I think I'm pretty well known in Britain as a printmaker amongst other printmakers, but I can't remotely claim to be a household name, My name.
Well, I suppose editing that magazine probably helped, you think?
Well, I thought so, but turns out not. No,
Oh, wow.
immediately after I was elected, Norman Ackroyd got in touch with me because he's one of the members, and he said, "Oh, and by the way, you were elected purely on the basis of your work and nothing to do with printmaking today." He specifically
Oh,
said that,
oh,
so
wow.
I was very
Yeah,
thrilled.
very touched because you were only the
But
third wood engraver to
third
be
wood engraver,
elected.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
ever.
I mean, there's a lot of kind of luck and chance in these things. And I mean, I had, as a printmaker, put in my work for the RA summer show for years and years and years, and with quite a high success rate actually, that I was
Mm,
very pleased about, and which had
mm,
helped me make some money over the years, because
mm,
sales of prints from that show are always very healthy. And then there came a year, it was 2009, and I was rejected from the summer show for the first time in years. So I felt, quite despondent, but these things often happen,
mm.
And so, yes, the following year, 2010, I thought, okay, well, I'll put in, a couple of very small prints and hope they kind of creep through the selection process, and that they're quite small, they won't take up much space. Not that any of my work is very large, but I think the previous year I had tried to get in some larger Linocuts, and they'd been
Mm.
rejected. So I was going back to quite modest ideas, small prints. And one of my two small prints that I submitted won the print prize in in that
Ah,
summer exhibition. So it was not only accepted, but it won a prize. And then it was the year after that I was elected. So I think the academicians, they're sort of looking at what's on the walls of the summer
mm,
show, and it's quite a long, convoluted procedure. An academician has to nominate you in the nominations book, and then
mm,
another 8 academicians have to support that nomination by adding their signature. And once you've got 9 Royal Academicians backing you in that nominations book, then your name goes onto an election list along with probably 20 other artists. And
mm.
then the academicians hold 3 or 4 election meetings a year to elect just 1 or 2 new members. So you're in, fierce competition.
Mm.
And then it's a sort of outright majority. The election goes through several processes, of kind of knockout rounds, if you like, until you
Yeah.
end up with a sort of runoff between 2 or 3 people who are still getting lots of votes, and until you get
Mm.
an overall winner. So obviously this
It's
must
more
have
intense than
me.
becoming the prime minister.
Yeah, same sort of
Yeah.
process, I think.
Mm.
And then so I some artists don't know even that they're on the list. I did know that I was on the list because the artist who'd nominated me had actually told me, and I thought, oh my word.
Oh,
um,
scary.
so he then phoned me up and told me I'd been elected. I was and remain still rather stunned and amazed by that, but delighted. And
Yeah.
especially because wood engraving has had such a kind of tiny mention, if you like, in the history
Yeah.
of the RA. There's been Charles Tunnicliffe, Gertrude Hermes, and now me.
Mm.
And so
That's
that's
amazing.
great.
And what comes with being an RA? What does that mean? What happens when you get elected to be an RA? What is the outcome, the benefits, and obviously the responsibilities?
Well, for a printmaker, it can be quite sort of career changing. It certainly has been for me. And that's really largely through the summer exhibition, because once you're an academician, you're entitled to submit works for the summer exhibition every year, and you will automatically have them included in the exhibition. And that's sort of between 4 and 6 works.
Mm.
Printmakers' works are usually small, so we tend to be allowed to have 6 works,
Yeah.
whereas painters may only be allowed to have 4, because they tend to work on a larger scale. And obviously,
Mm.
you want the public to have plenty of space for their own work. But that can make the difference between being able to give up other day jobs, and
Mm. Mm.
concentrate fully on being an artist, which is an extraordinary privilege. I I'm grateful for that every day.
Mm.
But also other opportunities happen. It is true that other galleries are more interested once they've heard you're an RA. It can help you get other exhibitions in other places. Within the RA itself, you you are expected, and quite rightly so, to have some input into the running of the RA. So there are various committees, to consider exhibition programs, or to look at finance and audit, or
all the
or
boring
the general
stuff.
board of trustees. They have a board of trustees,
Mm.
and you are expected to take your turn on being on those committees. And also, of course, there is the summer exhibition committee. So I've been a judge and a judging and selecting and hanging of summer exhibition twice now. And that's a sort of expectation as well.
Did you have to do that during the lockdown period when it was like the summer, autumn, winter exhibition?
Well, in fact, I was the last time I was on the summer exhibition committee was in 2019, so I just
just missed it.
missed that. Your name comes up sort of by rotation, depending
Yeah.
on when you were elected, and
Yeah. And do you have to get involved in the Royal Academy schools as well in some way?
I mean, you can do. There is a schools committee, and also there's I mean, the main way I've been involved with the schools myself is that they have had an annual auction of artworks to raise money to fund the schools, and so I've donated plenty of works to that over the years. But other people with more teaching experience are involved in the teaching or in the governance of the Royal Academy schools. I've got a lot of teaching experience, but it's mostly in print workshops, teaching wood engraving, and relatively little experience in more formal college structures. So I haven't really put myself forward for it being in the governance of the RA schools, but certainly I have been donating pictures from time to time, as and when it's requested.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space now, is it? Now it's all been renovated. It's absolutely stunning environment to study in.
Indeed. Well, yeah, and in fact, the renovation of the schools is a sort of ongoing project that's underway now, and should be completed later next year, I think. And yeah, it'll be very
amazing. Yeah, I love the fact that now you can walk in and into the RA, and then you can walk down and right the way through to the other side, and you get a peep into what's going on. And I've been into the RA schools area myself several times.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just so exciting, and to see what's coming through there. It's such the avant-garde. You just don't know what's going to come out of that educational establishment. And
Indeed.
yeah, it's very exciting to see it all really growing. And like you were saying about Liverpool and how it was regenerated and what a difference that makes, I think the same with the RA. So pleasing now to see crowds. When I first started in this industry 25, 30 years ago, getting people to just go into a gallery was almost impossible. And now you see people just queuing to go into a regular gallery and see a show. And I think Towner in Eastbourne has just been nominated, like literally today, the #1 place to visit in the UK. The Towner Gallery.
Yes.
And because it's going to have the Turner Prize next year.
Right.
So it's just so it is lovely to see how people now are much more feel much more able to just access these and be, like you said, when we were young, it wasn't an option, and now it's so much of an option.
Absolutely, yes.
So going back to the lockdown period, this is when you started creating your collages. So can you tell us about how that all came about, in as much detail as you want to go into?
Well, I mean, I've been making collages since 1990. In fact, when I had a Rome scholarship, I started making collages then. But the particular collages that I think you're referring to, I began to make those in 2021 in the sort of yes, in the teeth of the lockdown, and they're all based on a kaleidoscope toy that I'd bought in the John Soanes Museum some years ago, and I had kind of thought about how I might use that kaleidoscope toy. It's one of these kaleidoscopes. It's not one with a little box of beads in the end. It's one where it actually, the view that you're looking at is broken up into an amazing crystalline patterns almost. And I thought that could be interesting in terms of translating a figurative image into some extraordinary kaleidoscopic new world. So I had one particular print, a linocut of the deserted swimming pool at Manchester, the Victoria Baths in Manchester, and that was one of many linocuts that I'd done for a retrospective exhibition that I had at the Whitworth years ago. But I kind of thought about that linocut again during lockdown, because it was an abandoned, deserted space, but then also swimming pools were being locked down.
Yeah.
All sorts of public amenities were being locked down and, emptied of humanity. So it sort of struck a chord with me, I guess, looking at that particular one again. And also it had, the way I'd engraved it, it had a whole lot of different sorts of patterns and shapes and a lot of linear perspective in it, that I thought, if I cut up this linocut into lots of equilateral triangles and reassemble this in a kaleidoscopic form, it could become interesting. So I cut up half a dozen proofs of that particular print, which was quite complicated actually, because I'm not very mathematical, and to make it work, they did have to be very accurate equilateral triangles, because otherwise you're joining up the bits and they don't join. So it took quite a lot of planning. But they were new works and much more abstract than I normally do.
I'm going to share the screen so people can see what we're talking about.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. So yes, it was the sort of the greenish coloured ones. Yes, there's one in the centre of the screen there on a white
This
background. Yes, that one, and another 4 or 5 of that ilk that I made in 2021, and they were the first ones, and so they were a bit of a sort of secret for me, really. I think the lockdown time was it was awful in so many ways for so many people, but in other ways it was quite a liberating time, that I kind of felt, well, I can't exhibit anything, nobody else can judge this other than myself, and I can sort of make what I want, really. There's no pressure to make anything that
had you been offered the Pallant House exhibition prior to
No,
lockdown?
I hadn't. And no, I hadn't. It came about during the lockdowns, I think. And in fact, the initial suggestion was for a retrospective print exhibition. And so I hadn't been particularly preparing new work for that show. I was going through my stocks of what prints I had and what would make a nice grouping. But then the lovely curators from Pallant House came to see me in January 2022 to sort of firm up plans. So only the beginning of this year. And so I was showing them lots of prints, and then they were saying, so what are you working on at the moment? And I said, sort of, well, this is this little secret here, these large kaleidoscope things that are going in a very different new direction. And happily for me, they immediately said, oh gosh, we really like these. It would be much more interesting to have a show of new work with these, and can you make some more, all in time for a show in October.
And you were thinking, crikey, I've got to do lots of maths now.
Lots of maths, and actually it was a very exciting proposition, and one that I couldn't possibly have said no to, because it was just too lovely an offer. But it did come at an almighty difficult time, because actually I was diagnosed with breast cancer just before Christmas last year, and at the time that the curators came to see me, I was literally waiting for my appointment to go and have surgery and whatever other treatments were going to follow. So it was not a great moment, but as is the way of, even now after all these years, I'm a Royal Academician, I have a good career and so on, but still, if you get a wonderful offer like that, you just don't feel you can say no, because you don't know if that offer will recur at another date, because people move on, positions change, and you might never get that offer again.
Well, thank goodness you said yes, because the work is just incredible, and I would encourage. It's until February, isn't it, next year? And I would encourage. I would encourage everybody to go and see that exhibition, because it just shows that even when you've got an established career, and you've been doing something for a long time, when you're placed in a position where you have to get curious and creative again, how deep the well of creativity is within the human psyche, really. And they're incredible, they're amazing works, and they're on a scale that's, you know, unexpected.
Thank you. Well, in fact, you know, they helped me through the period of illness. I'm considered fine now. Checkups for 5 years,
good.
but I'm considered sorted, which is good. But
excellent. Pleased to hear it.
It did give me. It was a good distraction at a time that I really needed a distraction, and it did let me think in a slightly different way about what I was making, and a little bit less sort of anxious about what other people might think about the work, and much more interested in, well, I can have a go at this and see what happens if I work on that scale and try that and try this and mix watercolor with it, which I hadn't done before. Made private watercolors for me, but I haven't really used watercolor in the way that I have in this newer set of kaleidoscope collages from this year.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because when you are successful, then you are almost trapped, aren't you?
Can be. Certainly if you have a kind of type of work that people like, there is a sort of, you feel a pressure to make more of the same, and yes, that can be limiting. I mean, I've always tried in my collages to be as experimental as possible, but I've not so much gone down the road of abstraction. I guess that's an area I don't feel very confident. I'm much more involved with sort of detail and figuration, but somehow these kaleidoscope works seem to marry both aspects in a way that
they're a completely new language.
So.
Yeah, they're a completely new language that you've created, and it just goes to show, doesn't it, that yes, you know, we can be caught by our own success, but actually, if you're brave enough, which you were, and as you say, born out of a circumstance where, you know, you needed a distraction, to try something completely different. And I saw that a lot during lockdown with artists. They were like, oh, no one's looking, so I can be an oil painter now, or I can or I can be a graphite artist when I've been known to be a sculptor. And they can it's like changing school when you're a child. You can reinvent yourself.
Yes. Well, it certainly had that effect on me. So we'll see what comes next. I don't know.
Well, I was about to say to you, so what are you working on now?
Well, actually, at the moment, I'm just finishing a rather wonderful commission for Lincoln's Inn Law Chambers in London, who is celebrating their 600th anniversary this year. And they commissioned me to make six wood engravings of historic bits of their architecture, and they want a collage too, which I'm about to embark on. So,
oh wow! Do you know my very first job was in Lincoln's Inn?
Okay, interesting.
And that's where I met my husband, who's sitting right there.
Right.
We worked at a bank that was in Lincoln's Inn. And that's my very first job when I was like 18 years old. So I'll be fascinated to see those. I absolutely love that place.
Right.
And the architecture within that place is, I spent many times sitting in that garden. Oh, I can't wait to see what you create.
It's been a lovely commission, that. I must say, I don't quite know what I'm going to do when I finished it, because I've had to fling myself into it, you know, body and soul, really, because it's 6 engravings in a fairly short time scale. I started them at the beginning of October and I've just finished the last one a couple of days ago. But
that's amazing.
Collage, but six wood engravings in a couple of months is
a lot.
That is a lot. So I haven't actually now yet had time to think, what am I going to do in my own work, kind of beyond that, because
how does that affect you physically? Because it's quite a physical thing to do wood graving, physically and visually. How do you have like a kind of self-care routine while you're doing that? Because that's an intense period of looking and working.
Not really. I mean, I probably could do with a bit less stress in my life in a way, but on the other hand, there were such lovely things to engrave. The subjects were just so nice and so up my street, because I do like architectural work, you know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes in my own work, if I haven't got a specific deadline, I do find it quite hard to sustain the levels of concentration that you need in wood engraving. And certainly, if you haven't had a good night's sleep the night before, then that's really difficult. But if you have a decent night's sleep, it's all right. But also, there's nothing like a deadline to focus the mind. I've got to do this, and therefore I will.
Yeah, that formidable spirit.
But I don't know if I've got a specific self-care routine. No, I just think I get very focused if I have a deadline, and that's probably a good thing.
And sleeping.
And sleeping, yes.
Sleeping is the panacea for all, really. If we don't sleep well, then everything kind of starts to fall apart, doesn't it? And indeed, you sleep badly when you're stressed. So yes, please, Anne, less stress. Less stress and a bit more sleep, and that'd be good. You were saying about galleries and having deadlines and being offered, and then you talked about Manchester and you talked about Liverpool. Do you have gallery representation pretty much all over the country, or do you just have one main gallery?
Well, I've been represented by different galleries in London primarily over the course of my career. I was very lucky. Well, maybe luck isn't quite the word. I found other artists have been incredibly helpful and generous over the years. And so, the first gallery that represented me in London, and I stayed with him for 10 years, came about when I just came back from my Rome scholarship. I was 25, 26 years old. And another wood engraver who was represented by this gallery in Kensington very kindly gave me an introduction to this chap, Duncan Campbell, fine art. He's dead now. The gallery doesn't exist. But that was a really generous leg up from a fellow artist who was much more established at the time than I was, Edwina Ellis. I think a lot of things that have happened in my career have been through generous generous assistance from other artists, really, in other ways. Certainly, getting into the Royal Academy, there was another artist who nominated me. He didn't need to do that, I hope he did it. I believe he did it because he liked my work rather than, we were friends, but we weren't very close friends. We've become closer friends since I was elected because I've seen more of him. But there's been a lot of generosity. And then I was, after Duncan Campbell, I was with him for about 10 years. And then I was with a gallery called Hart Gallery in Islington. And they were wonderful, the Harts. And I was with them for 9 or 10 years, but then they closed their gallery in 2012 and retired. And then I was with Long and Ryle Gallery for 9 years in Victoria, near Victoria Station. And I'm still sort of represented by them, but I've also been shown this summer by Abbott and Holder in London. I think the world of galleries is becoming it's rather changing, and I think since the pandemic and since the arrival of or the rise of Instagram, if you like, for artists and artists' own means of self-promotion, I think the world of being tied into one gallery for a very long period of time is perhaps changing.
Yes, it's like how, back in our day when we first came out of school, it'd be like, you get one job and it was job for life.
Yes.
And it would have been one gallery and one gallery for life, but that's just not the case now. It's more of a kind of basket, isn't it, of that gallery and then some self-promotion, etc. So do you do self-promotion?
I do. I got into Instagram during lockdown, yes. And that's been wonderful. I'd always resisted social media for years, partly because I was thinking, how am I going to fit that into my day? It's too, I've got two children. Well, they're in their early 20s now, but they're both still at home, and my studio is in my house, and so there's a lot going on. And until 2020, there was also my mum, who she sadly died in 2020, but she was in Liverpool. There was a lot of toing and froing up there because she was very unwell latterly, and then my art career. So there was an awful lot going on, and I just thought, how can I fit social media into this? But in the first lockdown, my daughter set me up an Instagram account, and I
Always
thought, well,
thank
the
goodness for
galleries are
teenagers.
closed. Yeah, indeed. But I did think, well, the galleries are closed. How am I going to make a living? And actually, Instagram has been wonderful, both in terms of giving me a different profile and making direct sales that way. In fact, the Lincoln's Inn commission came about through that, because of a KC from Lincoln's Inn who started to follow me on Instagram and then recommended me for this commission.
Oh, wow.
So that's been very wonderful. But I would say, although it's fabulous, and I can, I know there's problems with different people's experiences of Instagram. For me, so far, it's been completely wonderful, and a great way of communicating with other artists, some of whom I've known their work, but I haven't known them. I feel made some new friends through Instagram. But I would also say that now that the lockdowns have eased, I am still involved with with various galleries. You asked about galleries around the country. So there's a gallery called the Bevere Gallery in Worcester, and they've got a promotion of my work on at the moment. And I had a long-standing relationship with Editions Limited in Liverpool. So there's various galleries around the country that I think do an excellent job, and Kevis House in Petworth is another one that
love Kevis
worked
House
with for years. Yes, so apart from London, there's other places around the country that really
people can see your work,
and that I'm always delighted to share with. Yeah.
I think it's a basket, isn't it? Now it's a basket of tools that artists can access, and as you say, as long as you don't let any one of those consume you, and you're consciously managing it, then they can all work really well.
I think so. And for a printmaker, it is, although it's quite a lot of hard work getting things out into all sorts of different places, if you're printmaking, you tend to be making an edition of things that are going to be sold at an affordable price. But that means you do have to distribute them to quite a number of places, because, an edition of 40 isn't going to shift itself, except perhaps if you're lucky at the RA summer exhibition, but usually you've got to put in quite a lot more effort than that to to get those things sold. And like many artists, I've got planchests, and you can see one. Another one this side of me, and they're full of prints that haven't sold. There's some things that I'll make that are extremely good sellers, but like everybody, there's always things you make that you think that'll be great, but actually you end up with the whole edition, or not the whole, but most of them, because it just hasn't clicked with other people in quite the way it has with you.
just yet, and who knows, what might, because taste changed.
So in fact, that's one thing I've noticed through Instagram, that when I've posted some older works, I've had sales of things that have been in my plan chest for years in some cases, and then suddenly there's been this new interest in them, which is rather nice. It sometimes an artwork has to find its moment, I think, and that moment might be 20 years after you made it, or it might be 10 minutes after you made it. It's very unpredictable.
I think that's a really good thing for artists to understand, that just because you made it and it doesn't sell then doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. It's just hasn't got its moment, or hasn't found its audience at that moment.
Yes.
Still love it, still keep it, cherish it.
It's definitely a thing, though. I think if you're like I am, you're trying to make a living out of your work, so you're not. I'm not an artist that's getting kind of Arts Council grants to put on a show of work that isn't intended for sale. That's I am in the world of trying to sell things, and it does rather inform your thinking about your work. If you make something and you're initially really pleased with it, and then it doesn't sell very well, you can find yourself thinking, oh, that maybe wasn't very good after all, and actually it might well have been fine. It hadn't found its moment yet, and maybe it will in some years' time. So it's kind of quite hard to keep your confidence in a particular work if it's not been one that as yet has sold particularly well. I still struggle with that, of finding it, just trying to maintain a level of confidence in in the works that do less well immediately.
Yeah, I think that's
all to
normal.
do with money. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I think that's normal. I think
Yeah.
it's also part of our survival instinct, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think
It all
so.
kind of clicks into our survival instinct. It's
Yeah.
like I need it to sell, so that I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
and yet
That's right.
10 years later, you go, oh wow, this is now selling really well because it's found its moment, it's found its audience, it's found it's found its vibe right at that
Yes.
moment. And
Yes.
yeah, takes a lot of experience though, I think, to be able to cope with that and just sit with it and go, it's okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Leave
Yes.
it in that plan chest. It'll be okay. I'll bring that one out later.
I mean, sometimes I
Definitely.
do end up cutting up some of the prints in the plan chest and turning them into collages. Of course,
Yeah.
that's another way of
Yeah.
getting
And
them
those
out there.
collages are stunning. So do carry on doing that. But not with all of them. Let's just have
Right.
a
Usually I'm cutting up the proofs that I've made, maybe if the colors weren't quite right, or I don't throw much away. So perhaps, if I've printed something and there's a bit of it that the printing isn't quite right, but most of it is lovely, then I can cut up the bits that were fine and use them for collage rather than throw the whole thing away,
So do you have your press in your studio there, or do you go elsewhere to print?
It's not in this studio. It did used to be in this studio, kind of over by the window there. But well, I live in a tall, narrow Victorian terrace house, and the press was in here for 18 years, something like that. And the floor was beginning to bow somewhat, and our living room is underneath. And my husband and I will be looking at the ceiling, thinking, "Is this press going to end up coming through the ceiling?" It got a bit worrying, but about 10 years ago, we managed to raise enough money to build an extension to the back of our house, and we have a new studio at the back. So it's also a first floor studio, but with a very much reinforced floor to take half a ton of cast iron press.
And do you ever have students or anyone coming to do things in your studio with you, or do you just very much work alone?
I tend to work alone. I just in the last month or so, I have been giving lessons to a student that I taught on a wood engraving course, and now I'm giving this chap extra private lessons, but via Zoom. So that's the sort of thing I wouldn't have been able to do before. And I think at some point when we've done as much as we want to do on Zoom, he will come here for the day and we'll do some printing of his blocks and see how that goes. So, but that's a new thing. And the possibilities of Zoom.
I know Zoom's amazing. It's kind of like another studio, isn't it?
Yes.
In the true sense of the word, because you can, I've done written books and interviewed lots of printmakers before, and I had to go to their studio and I had to go with someone who would record the conversation. And now I can just do it on here and record it and then just ask someone to transcribe it if I need it. Yes. And it is so liberating. So liberating. Yeah, and it opens a world of possibilities for everybody.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think everyone did get rather fed up of Zoom over the lockdowns, but in fact, I think it's going to be an enormous long-term advantage for us all in all sorts of ways that we're still discovering.
Yeah, as you say, who knows? Where this will go in the future and how it will develop. And that's the same with everything, isn't it? It's just, I find that is so exciting. So exciting. And I found, as I say, the reason I wanted to chat to you is because I found how you've taken your work so exciting. And I just thought I just need to speak to Anne. And it's been a joy. Thank you so much. You've been so generous in sharing your journey and the experiences that you've had. I'm very, very grateful for your generosity. Thank you very much.
A huge pleasure. Thank you very much.